put up a hard fight for the faith. Now, those are the words of Jude, the half-brother of Jesus, and it's important to consider them in their context. So let's do that. Please turn to Jude, verse 3. He says, "Beloved ones, although I was making every effort to write you about the salvation we hold in common, I found it necessary to write you to urge you to put up a hard fight for the faith." Now, Jude himself had been putting up a hard fight for the faith. Consider this. Just 3 years earlier, his own fleshly brother James was stoned to death at the order of High Priest Ananias. That was an open attack on God's people, and it must have been very painful to Jude and to others. But here's something interesting. Jude is not warning his brothers about High Priest Ananias or about persecution. He has something else in mind, a different type of attack, and this is a sneaky one. Let's look at verse 4, and we'll see why he wrote his letter. Notice the very first words, "My reason is." So this is what I have in mind when I'm writing you, brothers. My reason is that certain men have slipped in among you who were long ago appointed to this judgment by the Scriptures. So Jude is talking about false brothers who are presenting a real danger to the congregations, in some ways a greater danger than outright persecution. And did you notice what Jude said about those false brothers? They had slipped in. They were sneaky. Now, that was true back then, and it's true today, as we'll see. And brothers, this is a very serious matter that we're considering today. Think of this. Was the Christian congregation brought down by persecution in the 2nd and 3rd centuries? It wasn't. It was brought down by false brothers, apostate teachings. And so the devil can use an outright attack. He can use persecution to try to batter the structure of the Christian congregation, but sometimes he uses rant from within, a subtle means to attack us. But whatever method he uses, we have to fight. Our faith is involved, and our faith is worth fighting for. It's a gift from Jehovah. We have to hold on to it. It's a product of His Holy Spirit, so we have to put up a hard fight for our faith.
So yes, it's time to talk about that talk. David Splane, governing body member, is here giving the talk, Put Up a Hard Fight for the Faith. And by this point, many of you will know all about it because, of course, it leaked right here on the Lloyd Evans channel 7 or 8 days before it was released on jw.org. There has been much said about the video. I'm looking at my channel page now, and the live stream where we covered this for JW Watch is on 39,000 views, having streamed 2 days ago. So tens of thousands of people have already seen the spectacle of what is essentially David Splane's apostate rant. David Splane dedicates 34 minutes of the Powerful by Faith program to ranting against apostates and the media. That's what this talk is about. When he talks about putting up a hard fight for the faith, he's talking about fighting apostates and fighting the media, who are apparently hell-bent on, I don't know, the annihilation of Jehovah's Witnesses. You tell me. But it's interesting that he can't even get through his introductory comments without resorting to misrepresentation and efforts at manipulation and scaremongering. Take, for example, where he says,
Notice what Jude said about those false brothers? They had slipped in. They were sneaky. Now, that was true back then, and it's true today.
Yes, apostates are sneaky, apparently. They sneak around. They're cowards. Why don't they just come out into the light and be open about who they are? He's obviously completely overlooking the fact that everything is against someone who becomes an apostate. In other words, someone who stops believing the Jehovah's Witness religion. How can they be open? How can they walk into their kingdom hall and say, you know what, I don't think this religion's true anymore. Can we talk about this? Does anyone have any good arguments? Am I on the wrong path here? How can you do that as a Jehovah's Witness with this threat of shunning hanging over you? There's a reason why apostates are, quote, sneaky. And by the way, I don't think that's actually an accurate way of describing all apostates. I'm certainly not sneaky. I'm quite open about the fact that I'm an apostate. I know lots of people don't like the word apostate because of all of the negative connotations and stigmatization that David Splane and his colleagues attach to the word apostate. But for me, being an apostate is something that you need to do. If you find out that your religion is wrong and indeed abusive, apostate, according to the dictionary, simply means someone who leaves their religion. If you find out that your religion is false, if you genuinely believe that you've been misled by your religion, why would you want to stay in it? Of course you'd want to get out of it. But the problem is, the Jehovah's Witness religion doesn't let you get out, doesn't let you leave gracefully without crushing penalties. And that's why in some instances, yes, people do need to be sneaky, especially if they've got loved ones inside and they've woken up and realized that they're all being lied to, that everything that they've been led to believe for years or decades was a lie. They can't just walk into the Kingdom Hall and say, you know what, I don't believe this anymore. I'm happy to be friends with you all, but I'm peacing out here. There will be crushing penalties. So it's disingenuous in the extreme for David Splane to be characterizing apostates as sneaky, as he will do again in this talk, by the way. He also says,
and so the devil can use an outright attack. He can use persecution to try to batter the structure of the Christian congregation, but sometimes he uses rant from within.
Sometimes the devil uses rot from within. Apostates are rot. If you disagree with David Splane as a Jehovah's Witness, if you find yourself no longer being able to go along with what he's teaching, with the organization's policies, including policies that put children in harm's way, if you stop lavishing this man with the respect and adoration he craves, you are rot. Already the ad hominem is flowing. Already we're getting the insults. This is just blatant manipulation and stigmatization of anyone who disagrees with David Splane's authority.
So in this talk, we're not going to discuss persecution. We're going to discuss two of the subtle means Satan uses to weaken our faith: apostasy and negative reports about Jehovah's Witnesses in the media. So first, let's talk about apostasy, and we'll call it spiritual poison. Now think about poison. What's the best way to avoid being poisoned? Well, we have to recognize poison when we see it and then avoid it. And the same principle applies to teachings that could destroy our faith. And that's not always easy. Now, not many of our brothers and sisters would deliberately get involved with apostates, but it could happen without our realizing it. We receive letters at times from brothers and sisters who are troubled by something they saw on a web page, an accusation, a rumor about the society or about the organization. And the problem is, they had no idea that apostates were behind it. It's tricky, because the apostates don't advertise, "You are now on an apostate web page." They often pose as sincere witnesses who just have questions or concerns. And some who aren't really apostates can cause just as much trouble as the apostates do by their negative talk and criticism. Brothers, we need to be on the alert. This is serious. Suppose that, out of curiosity, you get into a discussion forum with individuals who claim to be Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. You don't know. You've never met them. And someone starts asking questions. What did you think of last month's broadcast? Did you really find it encouraging? Or do you think the brothers who write Watchtower articles are living in the real world? I wonder if they realize just how hard it is out here. And then a few others join in with their own negative comments. Now, you don't know whether these individuals are apostates or just brothers and sisters who are in serious spiritual trouble. But does it matter? How does it make you feel? When you leave the forum, do you feel upbuilt? Determined to expand your ministry? More convinced than ever that Jehovah has an organization that you love and that you're delighted to be a part of. You feel honored to be a part of that organization. Or does the experience leave you sad, uneasy, uncomfortable?
And there we have a direct appeal to emotion. It doesn't matter whether it's a valid criticism of Jehovah's Witnesses. How does it make you feel? If it makes you feel uneasy, if it makes you feel dispirited about your Jehovah's Witness beliefs, then it's not worth paying any attention to. You should avoid it. In fact, it's not just that you should avoid it. You should view it as spiritual poison.
So first, let's talk about apostasy, and we'll call it spiritual poison.
So we've already had in this talk apostates referred to as sneaky. We've had apostates referred to as rot. And now we're having apostasy referred to as spiritual poison. Do you get the feeling this isn't a religion that handles criticism all that well? That's the overriding feeling I'm getting here. And hopefully I'm not alone here. Hopefully even believing Jehovah's Witnesses will be watching this thinking, what is it with this religion? And its seeming inability to deal with even the slightest, mildest criticism. I mean, you think of the examples David Splane was giving there of people saying less than flattering things about JW Broadcasting or suggesting that the writers of Watchtower articles might not be fully living in the real world. These are really mild criticisms of the organization compared to what we can say about things like child abuse and blood transfusions and domestic violence. He's picking some real softballs, and apparently even this really, really mild criticism of the organization is poison, is something that people should absolutely avoid as a matter of life or death. And going back to this whole thing about apostates being really sneaky, he says,
It's tricky, because the apostates don't advertise you are now on an apostate webpage. They often pose as sincere witnesses who just have questions or concerns.
Ladies and gentlemen, behold my book, which, as you can see, is literally titled The Reluctant Apostate in huge letters on the front. And in case you're saying, yes, but that's a book, that's not a website. Well, I have a website as well with the same title. Reluctantapostate.co is the website that accompanies this book. So how on earth I can be accused of being sneaky, of not being open about the fact that I'm an apostate? And also, if you go on YouTube, you'll quite often find that people will put XJW in the description or in the channel name when it comes to their videos. They're not suggesting when they make their videos that they are believing Jehovah's Witnesses who just have doubts. Pretty much every XJW channel I can think of is very open right out of the gate when it comes to their standing, whether they're disfellowshipped or disassociated or still inside as perhaps faders, because you sometimes get YouTubers who have to hide their identity. I just feel David Splane is openly misleading his audience here and trying to manufacture this bogeyman who doesn't really exist. I mean, apostates simply aren't sneaking around in the way he suggests. If anything, there's quite some defeatism when it comes to actual apostates when they get out, when they wake up from their Jehovah's Witness indoctrination. They kind of realize almost straight away that it's almost impossible to just wake up their friends and relatives by approaching them and saying, oh, by the way, did you know that we were all lied to? Did you know that this is a false religion? In fact, it's a cult, and I'm prepared to give you all the reasons why. They know how their friends and loved ones are going to react when they try confronting them with apostate information. So actually, in most cases, I would even argue the vast majority of cases, former Jehovah's Witnesses just sort of surrender to the idea that their friends and relatives can't be salvaged, and they go off and they do their thing. Now, when people like myself don't do that, when we do produce content, we're making it available for people when they're ready to look at it, and we're making it very clear what our position is. At least I know I am. I make it very clear in almost every video. I mean, I'm not going to just repeat the same spiel at the beginning of every video. Hello, I'm Lloyd Evans, and I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, and I identify as an apostate. But it should be clear to any Jehovah's Witness who stumbles on my channel and spends any amount of time watching my videos exactly where I'm coming from. They should be able to figure out very quickly that I'm not pretending to be a Jehovah's Witness. So I guess we're left with the question, why does David Splane need to lie? Why does he need to entirely mischaracterize apostates and mislead Jehovah's Witnesses with these sweeping generalizations about apostates sneaking around? Again, those that do sneak around have a reason to be sneaky, have a reason to stay below the radar. It's because David Splane and his colleagues have manufactured an environment in which, if they are open about their lack of beliefs, there will be crushing penalties.
Now, someone might say, I need to get involved in that forum so I can help those people. They shouldn't be together. Even if they aren't apostates, they're not good for one another. Staying in that forum to help someone is like holding his hand while he drinks poison and then having some yourself so he doesn't have to drink alone. We need to follow the advice recorded at Romans chapter 16 and verse 17. Now think of this imaginary forum that we just described in the light of Romans chapter 16 and verse 17. Now remember, there's all kinds of negative talk flying around in this forum. You don't know who's behind it. And here's what it says in Romans 16, verse 17. Now I urge you, brothers, to keep your eye on those who create divisions and causes for stumbling, contrary to the teaching that you have learned, and avoid them. Now think about that forum. Does it create divisions? Yes. Is it a cause for stumbling? Could be. Is it contrary to what we have learned? Do we even have to answer that question? Now, whether it's intended or not, the effect will be to weaken our faith. So what do we do? What does Paul tell us to do here at the end of verse 17? He says, avoid them. Now, I'd like to say a kind word to some who may be involved in discussion forums. You may like to use this medium to blow off steam, so to speak. Maybe there are little things in the congregation that are happening that you wonder about, or decisions the elders have made that you wonder about, and so you get involved in the forum and you blow off steam, and after that you feel better. But what about others in the forum? How do they feel? Wouldn't you feel awful if negative comments you made were responsible for someone leaving the truth? I know you wouldn't want that to happen. So please, please, be careful about what you say. Now, another person might say, well, I can see where those warnings about apostates apply to so-and-so. He's weak, but don't worry about me. I'm spiritually strong. I can handle it. That's like a weightlifter, thinking that he can drink a vial of poison and it won't hurt him because he's so big and strong. We are not so strong, so spiritual, so intelligent, that we can't be affected by the poison of apostate ideas.
There we go again with the insults. Apostates are poisonous. Apostates are rot. Apparently David Splane can't make his arguments without resorting to ad hominem and slurs. But it seems he's really terrified of this idea of JW discussion forums. In my experience, they do seem to be a thing. I'm thinking of one forum in particular, JW Talk, which is heavily pro Jehovah's Witnesses. If you try and do what he's suggesting here and speak negatively against the organization, the mods are going to throw you off pretty quickly. They're kind of paranoid, as far as I know, when it comes to making sure that everyone on the forum is a Jehovah's Witness. But it seems that David Splane, because he is a power-crazed narcissist, just can't handle the idea of there being any environment beyond his control where people can talk about him or his colleagues. He just wants to be able to control everything, doesn't he? So he's terrified of even forums that are pro-JW, because how can he exert any influence there? He wants them to disband. He wants the only forums or the only environments for talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, for talking about the governing body and what they're doing, to be somehow controllable by him, somehow within his sphere of influence. And this, for me, speaks to the narcissism and arrogance of this man. I also find it interesting where he dismisses the idea of someone challenging an apostate idea because they're spiritually strong. He says,
Now, another person might say, well, I can see where those warnings about apostates apply to so-and-so. He's weak, but don't worry about me. I'm spiritually strong. I can handle it. That's like a weightlifter, thinking that he can drink a vial of poison and it won't hurt him because he's so big and strong. We are not so strong, so spiritual, so intelligent, that we can't be affected by the poison of apostate ideas.
if you think about it, this is a perfect example of cult-like black and white thinking. We're not talking about vials of poison, David Splane. We're talking about ideas. We're talking about genuine concerns. We're talking about arguments against your authority. And according to what you've just said there, everything's poison if it's not lavishing you with praise and respect. It's poison if it's a criticism of the organization, even if it's a valid criticism. What does it say about this organization if they are so terrified of even the slightest murmuring, even the slightest negative talk against the leadership, that they're likening it to something that can literally kill you? I don't accept that analogy. The analogy does not hold. You will not be killed purely because you are listening to what someone's argument is against your religion. If you're just going to block out any negative talk against your religion, what does that say about the strength of your faith? Does it not indicate that your faith is incredibly fragile and can be destroyed if you subject it to the mildest scrutiny? And isn't it hypocritical coming from an organization that literally goes round telling people, you need to leave your religion and join ours? And by the way, here are all our criticisms against your religious beliefs. So they're expecting everyone they meet in the ministry to criticize and apply scrutiny to their religious beliefs. But when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, they can't allow even the slightest scrutiny, even the slightest criticism, because apparently this would be like drinking poison.